A simple ache in your back? What if that was actually your body's alarm bell for something way more serious? Today, we're going to play medical detective and uncover the hidden story that back pain can sometimes tell. So, let's dive in and start gathering the clues.
So, our story kicks off with something we've probably all experienced, or at least can imagine. A small trip, a minor fall, a sudden twinge, and then you're left with this nagging back pain that just refuses to go away. You'd think, it's just a strain, right? Seems like an open and shut case. But trust me, this is just the first page of our mystery.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole thing, doesn't it? It is so easy to just brush off back pain. We blame it on a bad mattress or sleeping funny or just, getting older. But what if it's not the problem itself? What if it's just one symptom in a much bigger, more complicated case? That's the question we're digging into.
All right, so every good detective has to start with standard procedure. You don't just jump to conclusions. So let's walk through the very first steps a doctor takes when someone comes in complaining about their back. This is where the real investigation gets started.
The first tool in the toolbox isn't a high-tech scanner or some fancy blood test. It's just talking. A doctor is trying to build a profile of this pain. They're asking questions like, did this come out of nowhere like a lightning bolt, or did it kind of creep up on you? Does lying down actually make it feel worse, especially at night? That's a weird one, right? Is it a sharp stabbing feeling or more of a dull, constant ache? And, this is a big one, does the pain travel anywhere, like shooting down your leg? Every single answer is a vital piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so after listening, it's time to look. The doctor is now searching for physical evidence, bruises, scars, anything that seems out of place. They'll watch you walk, because your gait can tell a huge story about unsteadiness or even nerve weakness. And those simple tests, like asking you to walk on your heels? It might seem a little random, but it's not. It's a super quick way to check the strength of specific muscles and the health of the nerves that fire them up.
Okay, so far, this all feels pretty standard, right? Routine checkup stuff. But this right here is the point in our investigation where a really sharp detective starts looking for the twist. They're searching for that one clue that suggests this isn't a routine case at all.
Oh, no way. Not even close. If this were just a simple pulled muscle, yeah, the story would probably end right here, with some advice to take it easy. But when the clues don't quite add up, the entire investigation pivots. This is when doctors start actively hunting for what they call red flags. So this chart here, this is basically the doctor's pay attention list. These are the critical red flags that signal something bigger might be going on. For instance, a fever with back pain, that could point to a spinal infection. Unexplained weight loss or pain that gets worse at night, that's concerning for cancer. And bladder or bowel problems, that's a genuine emergency. But for our specific case, the big one, the real wait a minute moment, is the history of trauma. The fact that even a minor fall caused this much pain is a huge clue that the bone itself might be compromised.
And boom, that one red flag just flips the entire investigation on its head. We are no longer looking for a simple muscle problem. Now we're hunting for a systemic issue, something that's affecting the entire body. That back pain, it wasn't the disease. It was just the alarm bell. And the real culprit? Well, it's something you probably wouldn't expect.
And here's our unexpected culprit, myeloma. So what is that exactly? Well, it's a cancer of your plasma cells. Think of your plasma cells as the little factories in your immune system that build antibodies to fight infection. But in myeloma, these cells just go rogue. They start multiplying uncontrollably right inside your bone marrow, crowding out all the healthy stuff. So here's the direct link back to the pain. As these cancerous cells just take over the bone marrow, they literally disrupt the bone's structure. Imagine them like termites in the wood of a house. They're weakening the bone from the inside out, making it incredibly brittle. So that minor fall we talked about, a healthy person would just shake it off. But for someone with myeloma, it can be enough to actually cause a fracture. The pain wasn't really from the fall itself, but from the bone being too weak to handle it in the first place.
But the trail of clues doesn't stop with the bones. Nope. There's another major piece of evidence to uncover. And for this one, we have to look at the blood work. This is where we find the biochemical smoking gun.
And this really gets at a core idea in medicine. It's not just about what a doctor can see or feel on the outside. A truly great diagnosis connects those physical symptoms, the clinical features, with what's going on with the body's internal chemistry. Those lab tests, those metabolic clues, they tell a massive part of the story.
So here's exactly what's happening. As the myeloma breaks down the bone, All that calcium that's supposed to be safely locked up inside the skeleton gets released. It's like a jailbreak for calcium. It just floods into the bloodstream. This leads to a really dangerous condition called hypercalcemia, which is just a fancy term for high blood calcium. A simple blood test will show these high calcium levels, and it's another huge blinking sign pointing directly to this diagnosis.
All right, let's step back for a second and put all the pieces of our puzzle together. We've got the patient story, we've got the physical exam, we've got the red flags, and now we have the lab results. Let's see how they all create one clear picture.
And there it is, the solution to our mystery. The back pain that kicked this whole thing off wasn't the real problem at all. It was just the messenger, the body's alarm bells screaming that something was wrong on a much bigger scale. It was a single, local symptom of a widespread disease affecting the bones, the blood, and the entire body's chemistry.
So what's the big lesson to take away from all this? Well, first, that a seemingly simple symptom can be the tip of a massive iceberg. Second, it really highlights why it's so critical for doctors to take their time to really listen to the story and do a careful exam. Third, those red flags we talked about are the essential guideposts that tell a doctor, hey, you need to look deeper here. And finally, it shows that a great diagnosis is almost never about one single test, but about skillfully assembling all the puzzle pieces to see the full picture.
And this whole thing leaves us with one last question to chew on. We've seen how back pain can be so much more than just back pain. So it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other super common things, like a headache that won't go away or feeling tired all the time, what complex hidden stories might they be trying to tell? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this investigation.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to imagine the most high stakes geography in the world. We're talking about a landscape where a difference of a single millimeter, literally the width of a needle tip, can be the difference between a routine procedure and, well, a life-changing injury.
It sounds dramatic, but you're not wrong. That
Yeah.
is the daily reality of clinical anatomy.
Right. And usually when I think of the spine, I'm thinking of that plastic skeleton, hanging in a high school biology classroom. It looks so static, like a coat rack.
Mhm.
But looking through the sources for this deep dive, the clinical manuals, the pathology notes, it's so much more than a stack of bones. It's this active, dangerous, incredible machine.
Absolutely. It's really the chassis and the wiring harness of the human body all rolled into one. It's this constant engineering compromise between protecting the central nervous system, which is so soft and vulnerable,
Mhm.
and allowing us to move and twist and stand upright.
And that compromise is exactly what we're digging into today. We've got this stack of sources that goes way beyond the basics. We're talking about how a clinician actually looks at a back, sees what's happening under the skin, and makes decisions that can, save lives.
Our mission is really to demystify that, to go from the bony architecture all the way down to the microscopic neurons and see how it all connects.
And I have to admit, as I was reading through the prep materials, there was one fact that completely threw me. I mean, I thought I knew basic anatomy, but this was a total aha moment.
Let me guess. The length issue.
The length issue, the fact that the spinal cord is significantly shorter than the spine itself.
It is. And that one simple anatomical fact, that mismatch,
Right now, inside your body, there's this silent, incredibly powerful struggle going on. It's a constant push and pull, a microscopic tug of war that's running everything from your heartbeat to your breath. Today, we're going to dive into this fundamental balancing act. the body's decision to squeeze versus its command to let go. So what's the deal here, really? Right now, inside your body, there's this silent. We're going to dive into this fundamental, but the answer is just so elegant. What is the molecular signal that tells a muscle to contract, to generate force? And maybe even more importantly, what's the off switch? What tells that exact same muscle? Okay, time to relax. And look, this isn't just about, flexing your bicep at the gym. We're talking about the smooth muscles that line your blood vessels, the ones that are controlling your blood pressure at this very second. It's about your heart pumping in a perfect rhythm. This dance is happening everywhere all the time, and it is absolutely essential for life. All right, so let's start with the first half of the story, the squeeze. We're going to zoom way, way in, past the tissue, past the cells themselves, to meet the tiny molecular engine that actually creates all the force and movement in your body. So the two main characters in this whole drama are named actin and myosin. The easiest way to think about it is that actin is like a long, thin rope, and myosin is a tiny motor with these little heads that can grab onto that rope and pull. When thousands of these little motors all pull on their ropes at once, boom, the entire muscle cell shortens. That's the squeeze. So what kicks this whole process off? Well, actin and myosin are pretty much always ready to go, but they can't do a thing without a specific key to unlock the action. And that key, as you can see right here, is calcium. When a nerve tells a muscle cell to go, channels fly open and calcium ions just flood in. This rush of calcium is the trigger. It's what allows those myosin motors to finally grab the actin rope and start pulling. No calcium, no squeeze. It's honestly that simple. I mean, a constant squeeze would be a complete disaster, right? So the let go signal is just as vital. Let's flip the coin and explore the other side of this balancing act, the really sophisticated chemical message that tells our muscles it's time to chill out. Okay, so this whole relaxation process often kicks off with a fascinating little molecule called nitric oxide, or just NO. Think of NO as the starting pistol for a race. It activates this molecular worker, an enzyme, that's job is to convert one molecule into another. In this case, it turns a molecule called GTP into our star player for relaxation, CGMP. So here's the big takeaway. If calcium means squeeze, then CGMP means let go. This slide gives us a fantastic close-up view. See at the top? That's nitric oxide, or NO, moving from one cell into the smooth muscle cell just below it. Once it's inside, it activates that enzyme we talked about, which starts cranking out our let-go molecule, CGMP. And if you follow the arrows, you can see exactly what CGMP's job is. It starts kicking calcium out of the cell. Once that calcium key is gone, actin and myosin have to let go, and the muscle relaxes. Now, this is where it gets really practical. Because scientists understand this fundamental squeeze and let go system so well, we can actually design drugs to hack it for our benefit. We can intentionally tip the balance one way or the other to treat diseases. And we can do this in two main ways. On the one hand, we can just create more of the let go signal. That's how a heart medication like glyceryl trinitrate, or GTN, works. It's basically a portable source of nitric oxide, telling the blood vessels to relax and taking a huge load off the heart. On the other hand, we can play defense. We can stop the body from cleaning up the CGMP, which makes the relaxation effects stronger and last way longer. And that is exactly how drugs like sildenafil work. And this diagram just illustrates that second strategy perfectly. So follow that loop in the middle. Your body has a natural cleanup crew for CGMP. It's an enzyme shown here as PDE5. Its entire job is to find CGMP and break it down to turn the relaxation signal off. While sildenafil comes in and blocks PDE5, it's like putting up a giant stop sign. With the cleanup crew blocked, CGMP starts to build up. The let go signal gets way stronger and lasts longer, which increases blood flow. So just when you think you've got this all figured out, CGMP means relax, simple enough, right? Well, the body throws us a massive curveball. It turns out our little let go molecule has a completely different and frankly totally counterintuitive job in one of the most amazing parts of our body, our eyes. Okay, you have to follow this because it's just fascinating. In the photoreceptor cells in your retina, when it's dark, you have tons of CGMP floating around. And its job here is to prop open these tiny gates or channels for sodium ions. But watch what happens when a single photon of light hits that cell. It triggers an enzyme, a version of that same PDE cleanup crew we just met, that instantly obliterates the cGMP. With the cGMP gone, those sodium gates slam shut. And that change, the gates closing, that is the signal that travels to your brain telling it, hey, we just saw some light. So just let that sink in for a second. The body uses the very same molecule, cGMP, for two completely opposite kinds of signals. In your blood vessels, having more cGMP tells the muscle to relax. But in your eye, it's the sudden absence of cGMP that creates the signal for vision. It's an absolutely incredible example of how efficient and, honestly, how elegant biology can be. So let's bring it all home. We've journeyed from these tiny little engines in our muscles all the way to the complex chemistry of how we see. And it's all centered around this one theme of a constant, critical balancing act. So to recap the whole thing, the body squeeze is driven by our protein duo actin and myosin with calcium as the all-important trigger. The command to let go is delivered by cGMP, which gets its cue from nitric oxide. This simple yin and yang relationship governs a huge range of what keeps us alive. And because we understand it, we've been able to develop medicines that can literally save lives just by tweaking this incredible system. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. We've explored just one of the body's fundamental on-off switches today. But right now, as you're sitting there, countless others are firing away, regulating your thoughts, your hormones, your metabolism. It really makes you wonder, what other elegant balancing acts are keeping you going at this very second?
Have you ever had a pain that just didn't make any sense? Like a super minor injury that ended up feeling, well, major? Today, we're going to do just that. We're going to unravel a real clinical puzzle that starts with that exact feeling. It's a journey that takes us from a simple complaint about back pain deep into the incredible science of our own bodies.
And it all kicks off with this, a totally logical question from a patient. I mean, we've all been there, right? A little trip, a small tumble. But when the pain that follows is just out of control, persistent, and feels completely disconnected from what happened, well, that's our very first clue that something bigger is going on here. So, here's the setup. A minor fall, but major ongoing back pain. Now, your first thought is probably a pulled muscle, or maybe a bad bruise. But the sheer severity of it, and the fact that it just isn't getting any better, those are huge red flags. The story the patient is telling just doesn't quite fit the injury. Okay, so this is where the real medical thinking starts. You have to look beyond the obvious symptom. The pain is so out of proportion that we've got to start thinking differently. Maybe the problem isn't the muscles. Maybe it's the very structure underneath, the bones themselves. What on earth could be making them so vulnerable? This part is really the detective work of medicine. We have our main symptom, that's our first clue, but we need to find the root cause. And to do that, we have to go deeper than just a physical exam. We need to look for clues inside the body, at a chemical and even a cellular level. So how do we get that inside look? We turn to blood tests. Think of these as a snapshot of the body's entire internal chemistry. We're not just looking for the usual suspects like inflammation or infection. No, we're hunting for something more fundamental, a deep imbalance somewhere in the system. And bingo, there it is, buried in that lab report among pages and pages of normal results. One number is practically screaming from the page. This is it. This is the clue that's about to pivot this whole investigation in a completely new direction. Hypercalcemia. The patient's blood calcium levels are through the roof, dangerously high. And just like that, this case is no longer about a simple back injury from a fall. No way. This is a massive systemic metabolic problem. So the new question is, what in the world is causing this? All right. To really get why high calcium is such a huge deal, we first have to understand how our body is supposed to handle it. So let's take a quick detour and look at the amazing system that keeps our calcium levels perfectly, and I mean perfectly, balanced. So what even is hypercalcemia? Well, it's way more than just a high number on a lab report. See, when your blood calcium gets too high, it can wreak havoc. It can actually weaken the very bones it's supposed to build, and it can seriously mess with crucial organs like your heart and your brain. It's a big problem.
Our body's calcium control system is just incredibly precise. The best way to think about it is like a thermostat in your house. If the levels drop even a little bit, a hormone kicks in to bring them back up. If they get too high, the system shuts that hormone down. It's this constant, beautiful, dynamic balancing act.
And the master regulator, the thermostat itself, is a thing called parathyroid hormone, or PTH. When your blood calcium gets low, PTH launches this incredible three-pronged attack. It tells your bones, hey, release some of that stored calcium. It tells your kidneys, hold on to what we've got. And it supercharges vitamin D to help you absorb more calcium from your food. It's an insanely powerful system. Right, and you absolutely can't forget about vitamin D. It's PTH's essential partner in crime. It's like the bouncer at the door of our intestines, making sure we can actually pull all that good calcium from our food and get it into our bloodstream. Together, they keep the whole show running smoothly. Okay, so now we get it. We understand how the body's calcium balance is supposed to work. Armed with that knowledge, we can finally get back to our patient and figure out exactly what's gone so terribly wrong. It's time to put all the pieces together and name our culprit. The diagnosis is myeloma. This is the hidden enemy we've been looking for. It's a type of cancer that attacks the bone marrow directly, and it completely hijacks that delicate calcium balance we just talked about. So what is myeloma exactly? It's a cancer of your plasma cells. Now, normally, these are the good guys in your bone marrow making antibodies to fight off infections. But in myeloma, they go rogue. They multiply out of control, and they literally start to eat away at the bone from the inside out. And this right here is where it all just clicks into place. Just look at the classic symptoms of myeloma. Bone pain? Check. High blood calcium or hypercalcemia? Check. Our patient's symptoms are a textbook case. All of a sudden, everything makes perfect, terrifying sense. All right, let's solve this puzzle once and for all. This is the moment where we connect everything we're seeing in the patient, all those symptoms, to what the disease is actually doing inside their body, the mechanism of action.
So here's the final breakdown. That persistent back pain, it wasn't from the fall. It was from the myeloma cells literally destroying the bone. That crazy high calcium, that was all the calcium pouring out of the damaged bone and flooding the bloodstream. And why did a minor fall cause such a major injury? Because the bones were already fragile, practically hollowed out by the cancer.
I mean, a case like this is such a powerful reminder of why understanding the basic science is just so critical in medicine. It's all about connecting the dots, from the patient's story to their lab results, all the way down to the underlying process happening in their cells. That's how you solve the puzzle. That's how you get to the right diagnosis. And that really brings us to our final thought, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, what other common symptoms? A simple headache, feeling tired, a nagging cough. What if they're just the tip of the iceberg, hiding a much more complex and fascinating story that's happening just beneath the surface?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats. We're diving into a case that starts with something incredibly common, back pain. But as you're about to see, sometimes the simplest complaint can be a clue to a much, much deeper mystery.
All right, let's get right into it. Our story begins with a patient who shows up with some pretty bad back pain after what seems like a totally minor fall. So you got to ask, right? Did the fall cause the pain, or did it just pull back the curtain on a problem that was lurking there all along?
So, here's our game plan for this little investigation. We're going to start with the injury. Then we'll follow the clues the doctors find, uncover a really surprising connection to calcium, unmask the real culprit, and finally, see how all that science leads straight to a treatment plan. Okay, so this is where our mystery really kicks off. A patient comes in with some serious pain, weakness, and stiffness in their back. And while it seems like a simple injury set it all off, the level of pain just feels, well, it feels like it's way out of proportion for what happened.
You know, this is really the first big question a doctor has to ask. It's a critical fork in the road. Are we just looking at a straightforward mechanical issue, like a pulled muscle or something? Or is this pain a signal that something else, something non-mechanical, is going on deeper inside the body?
So, let's step into the exam room and see how these clinical detectives start gathering their first clues. It all begins with a really deep dive into the pain itself. First off, you have to know the lay of the land. We're zeroing in on the lumbar spine, that's your lower back. You can see how these vertebrae stack up to give you support, and all these little parts where muscles hook on. It's a complex piece of engineering, and understanding it is absolutely key to spotting what's gone wrong. Now, to really get the full story of the pain, clinicians use a structured approach. A fantastic one is this mnemonic, Socrates. It's basically a checklist to make sure you ask about everything. Where it hurts, how it started, what it feels like. You get the idea. Every single answer is another potential piece of the puzzle. And this is where the detective work gets really intense. While the doctor is listening to the patient's story, they're also listening for red flags. These are exactly what they sound like, major warning signs that this isn't just a simple sprain. They point to much more dangerous causes that need to be checked out, and fast. So the patient's story isn't quite adding up to a simple injury. Those red flags are waving. And this is what takes the investigation down a totally unexpected path, away from just the bones and muscles and deep into the world of biochemistry.
And here we go. This is the first huge plot twist. The diagnosis is a pathological fracture. Now, what that means is the bone was already weak before the fall even happened. The fall didn't cause the break. It just revealed that the bone was fragile to begin with.
So that begs the question, right? Why was the bone so weak? Well, blood tests give us our next major clue, hypercalcemia. That just means there are dangerously high levels of calcium in the blood. Now, that might sound backward. Wouldn't more calcium be good for bones? Well, no. If the calcium is floating around in your blood, it's not in your bones, making them strong. I mean, just look at how amazing the body's calcium control system is. Think of it like a thermostat. If calcium gets too low, one hormone kicks in to pull some out of the bones. If it gets too high, another hormone tells the body to store it. It's a perfect balancing act. But in our patient, this entire system has been hijacked. Okay, quick recap. We have two massive clues on the board. A bone that broke because it was already weak, and way too much calcium in the blood. The hunt is now on for a single culprit that can explain both of these things. And just take a look at this. This really shows you what's going on inside. You can see how the normal, healthy structure of the bone marrow has been completely overrun, invaded by something that just doesn't belong there. It's literally weakening the bone from the inside out. And boom, the culprit is unmasked. It's myeloma. So what is it? It's a cancer of your plasma cells. These are a type of white blood cell that are supposed to make antibodies to fight infection. But in myeloma, they go haywire, multiply like crazy in the bone marrow, and just start causing chaos. Myeloma attacks the body on multiple fronts. First, the cancer cells crowd out all the healthy cells in the bone marrow. Then they pump out tons of this weird, useless protein. And here's the kicker for our patient. They send out signals that put the body's bone demolition crew into overdrive, breaking down bone way faster than it can be rebuilt. And as if that weren't enough, there's another major problem. All those useless proteins floating around, they can clog up the kidney's delicate filtering system, kind of like pouring sludge into a coffee filter. This can cause massive damage and even lead to kidney failure. So, we have our diagnosis. Case closed?
Not even close. Now the real work begins, managing the disease. And this is where all that science, all that detective work we just did, becomes the roadmap for how to treat the patient. First things first, you have to deal with the most immediate danger, and that's the high calcium. It's a true medical emergency. So the first step is to rehydrate the patient with lots of IV fluids to help flush the system. And then give them drugs that specifically tell that overactive bone demolition crew to take a break. All right, once that fire is under control, you can go after the arsonist, the myeloma itself. This means using things like steroids to calm down inflammation, encouraging physical activity to keep the bones as strong as possible, and of course, starting powerful anti-myeloma drugs to attack the cancer cells head on.
You know, this whole case is just a perfect example of a core truth in medicine. The reason we could solve this puzzle, going from simple back pain to a broken bone to a cancer diagnosis, is because of a deep understanding of the basic science of how the body is supposed to work and how a disease can throw a wrench in the works.
And that kind of leaves us with a really fascinating thought, doesn't it? If a simple case of back pain can be the tip of the iceberg for a disease as complex as myeloma, it just makes you wonder, what other common everyday symptoms might be hiding a much deeper story, just waiting for a detective to uncover it?
I am sleepy, so I'm off.